Y'all know what it is.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Eggs. This week, we have very special guest, real estate CEO and entrepreneur, Dr. Eric Holsapple. On top of a successful 40-year career as a real estate developer and lecturer, Dr. Holsapple has used a practice of mindfulness to transform not only his life and business, but those of many others. He's been practicing yoga and meditation for more than 30 years, and in that time has developed a unique perspective on how merging business and mindfulness can be a catalyst in changing lives. Dr. Holsapple is the founder and lead facilitator of Living in the Gap, an organization that offers an array of popular workshops aimed at teaching countless CEOs and professionals a different way to operate mindfully while improving their bottom line. Joining us today for a conversation about how a mindfulness practice can help you personally and professionally by uncovering your hidden purpose, how work in the service of others can not only improve the world but be a sound business strategy at the same time, how mindfulness can find a fit in your business, and so much more. Please join us in welcoming to the show, Dr. Eric Holsapple. Hey, how are you, Eric? Welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm doing great this morning. I really appreciate being invited on. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for making the time for us. So I guess let's just kind of kick this conversation off from the beginning. Let's talk a little bit about just sort of who you are and sort of your entrepreneurial career, taking us all the way back to maybe your early ventures all the way up to what you're doing today.
Yeah, well, early ventures go all the way back. We ran a family business. We had a campground business. And so we always worked. And I was raised to work. I love work. I love business. And had a series of, jobs through college and whatnot, and always rose to the top in business, but was never very enthused about it until I went all the way through MBA. And then I got my first job in real estate. And that I just loved it. I just loved real estate, and I was really good at it. I worked for an Australian group, and they were coming into the country in the 1980s. I'm kind of old, been around for a little while. And they were coming in the country in the 80s, and I was their first U.S. employee, and I get in on the ground floor and ended up running offices for them in Los Angeles, Denver, and New Jersey. And we worked, man. I mean, I'd work all day, and then about 6 p.m, I'd get on the phone to Australia to the people that I reported to, because they were on the other side of the world. And then also two different ones that I reported to traveled around the globe once a month. So about every couple of weeks, I'd have to meet them, and usually it was on the weekends. So it was like 4 or 5 years. It was just a full sprint. And I rose to the, top by all measures, salary, the Mercedes, the corporate apartment, all that kind of stuff. But I was miserable. I just had no personal life. I was overweight. I drank too much. I picked up smoking again from I hadn't done since I was a kid. And I remember stepping on the scale. I got a transfer to Boston to help them out with a New York Stock Exchange company that they had acquired. And I remember stepping on the scale and going, oh my God, I'm 50 pounds overweight. I'm having chest pains. I'm single. And it was one of those aha moments when and maybe you've had this, but I just said, you know what? I got to make some changes. I got to make some changes, or I'm not going to be around here very long. And that's that point. I work towards, better health, dieting, getting back into exercise, which I had always done younger, but I'd gotten away from. I left that job, started my own company, consulted with them, met my current wife, and found yoga around that time. And decided to go back and get a doctorate. I wanted to teach and find something that had a little more purpose, a little more meaning in life. And yoga really was my first entry into mindfulness in that realm. So that was really the beginning of it. And that was around, my early 30s.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's super interesting. And it's funny, or, I think it's good for people to hear the story, right? Where you've done sort of the thing where you went to the top, because I think so many are chasing that, right? That's where they're all trying to end up, right? So I think it's always inspiring to hear the story of how I got there, but wait a minute, that's maybe not what you want to do. And so, but why mindfulness? Like, how did that come into your purview as maybe this is a way out of this?
Well, I'm not sure why yoga was attractive to me, if I just saw it in a magazine or what. At the time there wasn't yoga studios all over the place. And, it was just something I learned on a DVD disc. And I immediately took to it though. I noticed I had bad breathing habits. And I immediately started more or less a daily practice. But then the real kicker for me was a couple years later. My dad was a football coach when I was raised, and my older brother was a poet. My dad said to him, "You will play football," you know. Anyway, and he did, but his first chance he got, he rebelled, and they were kind of estranged for a dozen years or so. And it really hurt the whole family because my family was separated. And then I watched my brother take up meditation, and I watched him get closer and closer and closer and come back into relationship with my dad, who didn't change at all. He was in his 70s. He changed some once my brother opened up and they got a relationship back. I got my family back. My brother turned me on. I said, yeah, geez, I'd like to check that out a little bit. That was pretty cool. I really watched a relationship change with one person changing. He just changed his perception and whatnot and just became more accepting of my dad. And so I tried it, and for years I was what I would call a closet meditator, which is, I just kept it to myself. It was my home. Mindfulness can be an incredibly private practice. You don't have to share with anybody. I did that for years. And later on, it gradually worked in the business, and that's another whole slant on it, how that happened. But that was my interest in it. And I just noticed immediate difference in my happiness, stress levels, and focus, ability to focus on things that I choose to focus on.
So can we take a step back? Let's go back to your pivot point. When you left the big corporate world and kind of decided to go off on your own and consult for them, what were some things that you did to stay afloat and start a new business? And what was your game plan initially when you left the corporate world?
Yeah, well, my first game plan was to live, because I really had a thing that I needed to make some change. So what I did was I did have a consulting gig with them that helped me get started. It helped them too, because they were in a spot, and I didn't want to leave them in that. So the consulting helped. And then this was like the early 90s was a pretty big downturn, and we started acquiring notes, mortgage notes and those kind of things from banks. That was the old Resolution Trust. I don't know how long you guys have been around, but that was the old RTC, Resolution Trust Company days, that had taken over from the savings and loan debacle of the 80s. So started buying some notes and just had a plan. I started doing real estate. I'm from Maine originally, and that was in Boston. So went back there and got with my current wife. We got married, and then my game plan, I said, I'm going to go back to school. So I came back to Colorado and went through the PhD in economics program at Colorado State University.
And then you started teaching.
I went in, I said, I like teaching. I was a GTA during my MBA. And I thought maybe that's it. And I love teaching, but I was too entrepreneurial for the university world to be full of that. And plus, I love to spend money. I love trips. I like things. I like to ski.
Who doesn't, right?
Well, and I decided I would teach part-time. So I started right at that time teaching real estate. I taught 20 years. Some part-time, several times I went in full-time, helped them get their real estate center started, actually ran the program for a few years in the downturn of '08. But mostly I was an entrepreneur and developer, and that's when I was most fully expressed and best. When I'm creating a project is when I'm really on fire.
Like that. So I know you're currently consulting and you have your mindfulness program, but whenever I have a real estate person on, I like to kind of pick their brain a little bit because I'm kind of trying to start getting into it a little bit myself. Sure. I haven't pulled the trigger on anything. can you maybe right now is kind of an interesting time in the world. There's a lot going on in politics. There's a lot going on. Talk about a recession, this and that. Do you have any advice for someone who might be getting into the real estate world right now? Of A, should you, and B, like um, with the looming recession, is it the right time?
Well, you'd want to be careful right now because the market's changing, right? So, I mean, we look like we're headed into a recession. I think they'll most likely have to bring us into recession to get inflation under control. I mean, interest rates themselves don't stop inflation. The interest rates slow down the economy, which shuts down demand, which
Yeah.
will put which will ease up on the demand on supply and will have prices fall. So I know politically they can't say it, but I think they have to cause a recession to get prices under, and it's a global situation. So the other side of it is we don't have, like in the '08 recession, we had a dramatic oversupply.
Hmm.
There was all kinds of stuff in process. We don't have that this time. There isn't a dramatic oversupply. And there's several things happening that the price of real estate is going up dramatically. One is all the supply chain issues. So those costs are another one, particularly in my area of the country in Colorado in the West, is water prices.
Yep.
The other thing that's happening is the sustainability push. It's going to mean new real estate projects are necessarily more expensive than old. And anytime the price of the next unit, the marginal unit, goes up, it raises existing value of existing. I think real estate has a brilliant future. If you can get in, and of course, interest rates are going to be the toughest thing that cause you. But I think real estate is going to continue to. I mean, it may go down in 23, but I think generally real estate's got a brilliant future, particularly in the United States.
Yeah, I've everything like we get a lot of people on that when we talk real estate, they instantly bring up Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I'm actually kind of like intrigued by you because you've been in it since before that book, and so that's not
Yeah,
necessarily your
I
reference
have.
point. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Um, with the in the '90s and the '80s, interest rates were high. I
20,
remember.
22% there in the 1980s when I first got into business.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
it was a prime rate.
you've dealt with that before.
Yeah.
Is there a different game plan when you're going into a real estate business model with a higher interest rate versus like low down, just buy it, flip it kind of stuff that's been going on recently? Are you essentially buying to hold and looking for? I guess what is your advice for the looming situation with the higher interest rates?
Well, higher interest rates won't help you acquire, but they're going to create opportunities because, like in the '08, '09, people could hang on because interest rates were so low. 2, 3% interest rates. I mean, people really held on. Earlier recessions, and I think will be true of this one, it's going to be difficult for people to hold on. There'll be more foreclosures, more distressed real estate, which I've made more money in down times than I ever had in good times in real estate because you get better buy opportunities. The downside is the banks will probably turn you down because they are always looking in the rearview mirror. When you really
Hmm.
get a buy and the bank says no, is the time you say, I think I want to buy this, because the banks and appraisals are always looking backwards. And as entrepreneurs, we need to be looking forward, or as Gretzky says, where's the puck gonna be? Right. So when it's down a little bit, but if you find something good, you'll find capital to buy it. You may have to find partners or whatever else, because it'll be harder to borrow the money from the bank. Interest rates are higher, plus they'll be more resistant, but there will be better buys out there. And usually you make your money on the buy. The day you buy it is the day you made your money.
Exactly. Do you have any recommendations on how to find the? I doubt Zillow is the way to go to find your deal, there's other ways. I'm sure Rich Dad Poor Dad, the what was it? Go out, walk your neighborhood that you're looking for, look for the distressed properties, and try and get in touch with that person.
I do. You do
Um,
all those things. You do
it,
all those things.
all those things.
Yeah.
Um,
Interestingly, with our work, I think that and this is taking you off on a different kind of slant. I hope that's okay, but
yeah, it's fine.
I find, particularly for real estate, but really all businesses, when you're trying to get going, the best thing is to jump into the nonprofit world, in the service world, and get yourself out there, because you meet people on a whole different level, and you just hear about things when you get out there, and you meet other givers and things. And if you get out in that world, you just hear about things. You just start. I mean, the worst thing I do, I think, is just stay home and look online.
Yeah,
you know,
I because I
get
could
out in the
spend.
world, talk to people, meet people, and it's people that know you, like you, and trust you. And the more you get out there, the more people that know you, like you, and trust you.
Yeah,
And that's where you find opportunities.
true.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk a little bit about then sort of your transition into, I mean, you've at this point, you've started your own business. You've transitioned to a state of mindfulness where you're starting to use this in your own life. How does the transition happen to taking mindfulness into business operations? And now it's funny for people listening today, it's probably not that weird to think of some sort of mindfulness idea inside a corporation.
Isn't that great?
Because a lot of people are starting to do this kind of thing. I know of some companies that have meditation suites in their office, for example. So I know that there are a lot of people buying into it nowadays. But at the time you were doing this, in the 90s, that probably wasn't quite as prevalent. So can you talk about sort of just that transition and sort of any challenges you experienced being on the vanguard of that movement?
Yeah, my advice number one is typically don't share until you've achieved. And by that I mean to have some stabilization of your own practice, because the world is still primarily skeptical.
Right
And
here, I'm one of those guys.
and if your own practice isn't solid enough, that skepticism can knock you off your own game. So make sure you're solid in your own practice. And as I say, it can be completely private. And then you look for openings. I mean, the best way to share it, and what happened for me, is people just started noticing changes and noticing where I didn't used to have time for people, I was making time for people. Where I would get really angry and upset, I didn't get as angry as an upset, you know, or in front of a public meeting, I could take arrows without getting it personal, without, just let it be another thing. So that's one. And the other is, you just start knowing people, you start having conversation when someone's struggling, and you're starting to talk to people, like you're not just focused about yourself all the time, which was me. When you're starting to actually be interested in other people, you offer, when you see someone struggling, hey, maybe try this. Here's a book. Look, this was interesting. Or here's a workshop you might try, or something, or try this, and just sit and practice with them. Slowly, you get one or two. What we did was we started a seed group meeting when I found a few people, and we just started off with 2 or 3 people. We'd read a book, do a center, and sometimes it's better to call it centering than meditation. And also the goal is not to have everybody in the company meditate. They won't. It's a formal practice, but mindful, you can have everybody be mindful, and it's contagious. Once you get some people shifting over, it just changes the whole vibe in the company. It's really cool. So we started a seed group. We started with 2 or 3, and before we knew it, the room was full, of people that were looking for less stress. The other thing that's magic is, we had little things like, you go have a coffee with somebody different in the company every week, and you talk to them not about business, but about their personal life. Because you find that, we found anyway, I don't know what you'd find, we found that we really don't know the people that we work with, like what their real trials and tribulations, and what the kids are, and what they're good at, and those kind of things. We tend to find out enough to get what we want, to be sociable and to see what we need to move our ball along. But when you turn it to actually be interested in the other people, the relationships just blossom, and people are there on another level for each other. So that's mindfulness to me,
And I
really
think
just
that
starting to know people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a beautiful observation, and I think it's probably true, right? I mean, we do, we sort of know, Julie from accounting as the lady who does the books, right? Like, I mean, we don't
Exactly.
necessarily know, her marital situation or what she likes to do on the weekends. Maybe some people do, but as a generalization. And so I think it makes sense that, developing relationships through this mindfulness practice is an obvious way to do that. You mentioned, not everybody's going to do this. What are or have you observed, I guess, from people who are reticent or maybe resistant? Have they, like, is there a common complaint? Like, is there a reason they choose not to go a mindful direction?
Uh, well, one of it is, I mean, I think it's still not a societal norm. It's still bucking culture. It's not the normal thing to do. And I think until we get there, there'll always be resistance. I mean, it's a very simple practice, but it's not easy, to do. It takes something, I find that it takes a period of time. We start people with 2 minutes, because until your brain, if you start off with 10 or 20 minutes and your brain is still crazy, uh, it looks like and it scares you. It scares people. Oh God, I
So,
went there. That was, oh God, I don't want to go up there.
so are you
And we're all
talking?
that way.
Are you talking 2 minutes of just meditation or two
Yes.
minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's I mean, it doesn't have to be meditation. Uh, there's mindful walks, time in nature.
Yeah.
That's our big deficit, you know.
A lot of us sit behind a computer for so long that that's all we do, and we don't get outside and breathe fresh air and
Yeah.
enjoy nature in general. So I
Mindful
could.
walks without the phone. And people, we're all afraid to leave our phone for a minute because we may get the text that changes our life. But a 10-minute mindful walk with your phone left behind can be transformative, where you're just out, really breathing, looking at feeling the wind, feeling the sun, doing those kind of things can be a great start to it.
So I was raising my hand saying I'm one of those guys that like don't really get on board with like the whole mind. Well, okay, so let me clarify. Mindfulness, I can see the benefits of pondering and thinking about your day, thinking about your business, thinking about where to go, what to do, how to approach your upcoming day. Where I kind of draw the line and have like the doubtful thoughts or whatever is when it starts to get, for lack of a better word, woo woo or spiritual or a little bit out there for me. And I know there's
Perfect.
both sides, the spectrums. You got your grounded thoughts, and you've got we've had some guests where we've actually had to not air because it was too far out there. And
Doesn't happen.
I guess.
I'll be careful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
now you're on warning. Yeah.
Check one. No,
Well,
I guess go ahead.
let me back you up a little bit, because it depends on what you think or what you define mindfulness as. So there are some, 10-foot long mindfulness definitions of the ability to pay attention on purpose, non-judgmentally, blah, blah. I'll boil it down to one word. Mindfulness is the ability to focus.
Okay.
Period. Can I focus? And that's what we've lost in the world. The ability to focus. We have so many things, from our phones to advertising to Facebook to, news media, to everything at us every minute, to business, to whatever it is getting at us. We've just pulled in so many directions that we've lost the ability to focus. Mindfulness is getting that ability to focus back. So yeah, I may start with meditation, learning to focus on my breath, but that isn't the point of meditation or mindfulness. The point is to be able to focus. So I take that practice of my breath, or yoga to me is meditation of the body. Can I focus in my body? And when I go on a walk, can I focus on a tree? If I'm in a meeting, can I focus on the person I'm with? Or am I constantly pulled away by my phone and the other meetings and whatnot that I'm so distracted? I didn't even hear what the person was saying. I'm so caught up in my own conversation. So there's nothing woo-woo about focus. In fact, woo-woo is the opposite of that. It's not focusing. We're all in woo-woo. This is saying, get the woo-woo out of here. I want to be able to choose what I focus on, whether it's that business idea or my kid or my wife or you. Can I do that for that period of time? And the key to me is notice when I'm not, because I'm going to constantly be pulled away to those thought patterns again, pulled into that brain and that thought and get lost. And then I notice I'm lost. And as soon as I do, I'm back again. I'm present.
So is
So
that is it noticing that you're lost? Is that the because I've heard people explain meditation a lot of different ways, and some people are say just clear your mind and think about nothing, and if you start to think about something, notice that you thought about it, and then try to get back to nothingness. And um, as someone who is not a an active meditator, I've tried it a few times, and I've actually I enjoy just like brewing a cup of coffee and kind of sitting out on the porch and kind of waking up that way and getting my day started that way. But I don't necessarily think I go into it with I'm intentionally meditating mindset. Is there a difference? Is there like a way to approach it correctly to where you get the maximum benefits out of it?
yeah, I mean, I think that's the intention is the key to it. Having the intention of focusing or being mindful, whatever you want to call it. I think focus takes the woo-woo out of it. It's the intention of training myself to focus. So for a period of time, it can be as simple as listening to your breath. You close your eyes for a minute and just try it for a second. Just close your eyes and just hear yourself breathing. You can call it meditation, just means to become familiar with. I'm learning something. I'm focusing on something. In that training, it isn't about the time that you spend in the meditation. That's so that you can do it throughout the day. And the idea is, for me, what I think the real win is when I feel stressed during the day, I just notice myself in my body and in my breath rather than in my brain going, ah, I can just notice myself taking a deep breath automatically because I've had that practice. And then from there, I can deal with anything, bring it on, including death. Bring it. I mean, don't challenge me with that today, please. But that's the goal.
I was going to say, let's get through the show first. We don't want to have
the goal is to be able to deal with anything that comes up. Because life is, let's face it, life is one disaster after another. And it's us managing those disasters and learning to surf in those things. And mindfulness is one of those tools that allows us to navigate through a crazy world and still find joy and peace and happiness.
Well, so let's take this a little bit back to sort of, I guess, a corporate environment, right? If we're trying to install sort of a meditation practice, I wonder, how do you quantify something like this to a business leader, right? So, I mean, think of anything, even in your own life, your fitness program, the way you eat, whatever, like everything we do is kind of for the long term, right? It's the stuff or the decisions you're making now, because at least we can kind of wrap our head around the fact that by doing the right thing today, down the road, it will be worth something. Mm-hmm. It seems like for some people, especially those that maybe have a little resistance to the idea of mindfulness, or maybe they're caught up in sort of like what Mike was describing, sort of they think of it as woo woo, or they think of it as whatever, and they don't necessarily see it as a factor to move the bottom line. How do you, I guess, take and like what are the metrics of success for something like this if you're going into a business environment and saying no, you should give this a try?
Well, first I'd say there are finally some studies. I mean, Aetna insurance company did a study with 13,000 employees, and they documented $2,000 per employee annually savings in healthcare costs and a $3,000 per employee increase in productivity. And there have been some other companies. My experience with our company is that I don't know the healthcare. We haven't studied that, but I know on the production side, and I deal with a lot of high income producers, 7 figures through the roof with less time spent in work, as much production or more, and less stress and better relationships. I think if you boil it down to focus, that there isn't any downside to the business. You pick up efficiencies in your day. Like one of the exercises we do is just have you calendar your day for 2 weeks and see what pockets of time you're wasting. We all waste quite a bit of time. Beginning mindfulness practice, is a few minutes to when you're practicing to get that time back. We've instilled a half hour a day where we let people, practice mindfulness on the payroll. And we haven't noticed any deduction and any reduction in productivity. In fact, we've noticed that people, come together and bond a little more during that time and efficient. Now, I also have found that the high producers in the office don't take that time. They want to do that in the morning or at night. They don't want to take time in the middle of the day, but for staff, it's easy, and it's attractive to give them a little time during the day to do it. And we've seen it pay off, not in a reduction in productivity. So I guess I'd say I don't see any downside to it if you keep it in the focus realm.
Right. Yeah, I think
Health,
that makes sense, right?
focus.
Because so much of our energy is spent worrying about productivity. And I think that that's maybe one of the, if you're thinking about sort of industrial revolution model, they're going, okay, well, you've got a 40-hour work week. Like if I give you 4 hours a week to work on this, like, I mean, that's 4 hours less productive, right? And I mean, obviously, and I'll make this up. I mean, I know there are studies to back it up, although I don't know the data. But, I mean, obviously there's a lot of evidence out there for, being able to slow down and concentrate. I think a lot of people made this argument with remote work, right? That they were able to get a lot more done with less distraction and they could actually, be more productive in less time, right? And so, this sort of time-based methodology of tracking efficiency probably isn't the best way. And so, and it's funny, like even as we think about it, just, this idea of slowing down to speed up, is almost a little bit counterintuitive. But I think when you hear, you read the studies about sort of the way that people's minds work, and a 10-hour day isn't necessarily more productive than a 6-hour day. I think it's really interesting, or maybe could be a compelling point around this mindfulness idea that it's okay to give yourself time, and like you said, if you call it focus, that feels a little more business centric too.
And I think that's generally what it is the ability to focus. And I also, we have a system, I call it baseball, of, how to prioritize yourself so that you can be the most productive while you're at work. So I say for me, getting up to home plate is my mindset, getting my mindset for the day. Pitching mound's life, I don't know what's going to come at me that day, right? Could be a hurricane, earthquake, Fed raises the rates 5%, whatever it is. I don't know what's going to come at me that day. So that's life, and I want to have the right mindset. And for me, is first base is family and friends. I want to have those set for the day because I could have the greatest job in the world, and if my family's a mess, I'm a mess. Also, so second base is work for me. When I get to work, I want to be able to focus on work and not be constantly having to check my phone for my family to see if they're doing okay, or my Facebook feed. And you walk down the hall, you see all kinds of people, right at offices on their social media, on things, checking out. But if I can handle that family first, and it might have to be the night before to make sure that they're set for the next day, but I want to have that family set and then work. And when I'm at work, I want to focus. It's amazing how much work you can get done in a short period of time if you're focused. I
Right.
think it's really amazing. And then third base for me is community service, saving the world. Not until I have my job done and my family's taken care of. If those things are done, then that community service is just a real bonus. And I'd say you can do it all if you prioritize right. You can get it all done, and that's a home run.
So, is you mentioned something about how much you can get done in a short amount of time if you're focused. I've actually kind of experienced some of that and been in what people call flow state. Is there a way to kind of enter that flow state through your mindfulness approach?
Totally.
Is it? I, I don't know when I've gotten into that mode, like I can, like editing, for example, I can get 6 or 7 shows edited in like no time, or I can sit and just code for hours once I get in that mode. It's getting in that initial mode that's hard because squirrel, right? Um,
Yeah.
is it essentially just sitting down and meditating for 20 minutes before you get into it, and
Well, I
then
have a series of things to put me in flow state, and that's what my morning routine is, to put me in flow every day when I walk out the door. And for me, it's reading at least 10 pages from a good book. Now, a lot of people have trouble with reading, especially when they start. I think most of those issues have to do with focus, but reading is one of the biggest flow activities. And so some people have to start with an audio or just start with a page or two. But reading something, it also puts the right kind of things in your mind. Your mind's full of stuff, right?
yeah.
The idea of meditation helps you clear out the old shit stuff. Sorry, I
Oh,
didn't.
you're
You can
fine.
edit that
You're
out.
fine.
I know
And
you.
then we want to put back in there what we want to come up, right? So reading something that's inspirational, uh, some mindful movement can help, particularly if you're athletically focused, because getting into your body slows down the mind. And when I say getting into the body, I mean consciously realizing that we're in our body. And it's not that. That's why I loved yoga. That's what it got me and noticed, like, gosh, that's so unbelievable. Yes, some meditation. Gratitude's another one that changes a mindset like immediately. And we start looking for things to be grateful for rather than things to be upset about. So there's actually a guy that wrote a book, Flow. I can't pronounce his name. It was this long. It's C something. It's long. He passed away last year. But yoga is a flow activity, and that's no. If you go to a yoga class, the yoga instructor's job is to put you in that yoga state over an hour period. So when you come out, you're in a flow state. But you can do that for yourself or more. Most people have something which gives them that flow state. It could be fishing. For me, it's snow skiing. Some people, it's taking a hike. Could be sewing for some people, or tying flies, or maybe it's editing, something like that gets that. But my goal is to have that flow state at work. I want to be able to come in and have that, flow at work and just have that go, because I spend more time at work than anything else. So what a gift you have if you get in that flow state while editing. What a gift that is, to love and be able to get in that flow state by what you do. That to me is the
Yeah.
ultimate.
So for me, um, it's when I'm really interested in finishing the project, or if it's exciting for me. If it's
You're
work that I'm
focused.
dreading, I have a much harder time actually getting into that state. And I'll get into it. I'll spend 10 minutes and I'll get up and get coffee, or I'll get up
Yeah.
and throw a ball for the dog, just not because I need to throw the ball for the dog right there, and he's not hounding me for that. It's more of like,
It's a distraction.
yeah, and it's an
We crave
intentional
we
distraction.
we crave distractions. Food's a
Yeah.
distraction. There's all kinds of distractions. And that's one thing that meditation can do, is start help making us notice all the distractions that we crave, like the phone. And
Yeah.
that's a distraction. We love that. We love to be distracted, because then we don't have to focus. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the training. That's the practice, is learning to focus. Learning, okay, I want to be distracted, but don't go there now. Just for 2 minutes, I'm not going to allow that. Then it's 3, 4, 5, making it a little longer once
Yeah.
we can do that.
So I mean, you said that you started out as somebody who became a fan of doing yoga and then sort of transitioned, or maybe it's a natural transition into doing more mindful things because of just the nature of yoga. But like, as you're introducing mindfulness programs in corporate environments, is there still a role for yoga in that?
Yeah, there is, although I've gone away from like insisting on it. We use yoga to show the purposes of that, but I've learned for myself. Actually, it was interesting through the pandemic. I learned when I got to be about 50, I had to start weightlifting just to be able to continue the sports that I love to do. And I thought maybe yoga weightlifting wasn't mindful, but I really learned it was my approach to it. I think if you slow down a little bit, do more reps, a little less weight, and actually focus on the muscle systems that are firing at the time, that can be a mindful activity. Pilates can be a mindful. So I've gone away from, like, when I started, I was insisting people do yoga. I've tried to show through yoga how you can be mindful in your body and take it to what you like to do. Some people it's running, it's important that some people it's dance, it's important that you have something. And then yoga is really the science of consciousness. It was created thousands of years ago to prepare the body and the mind for meditation. The last 100 years or so, it's gotten to be gymnastics, but that's not really necessary part of it. It's more, it's a meditation with the body, the yoga that I practice. So, and you can learn that with a lot of different activities. So there is a role for it, but just like everybody's not going to do meditation, everyone's not going to do yoga. So I try to give them an entryway and show them through yoga how you can use that to calm the mind down, and also how you could take that, if it's your activities weights or your activity is running, how you could take that to your activity and get many of the same benefits.
Yeah, it's funny because I found that I quite like yoga, but I stopped doing it because so I used to go to the gym sort of near my house, but I would go during the day because I worked for myself. And so I'd go over there at 9 or 10 in the morning and go do this yoga class. But it was a class full of like 80-year-old women. And these women could just stretch like you wouldn't believe, right? I mean, their ankles are up around their ears. They're doing all this crazy stuff. And like, for me, it's hard, right? For me, it's really hard work. And like, I'm not getting much stress or much stretch and all that stuff. So I found that I was very self-conscious. And then when I finally got to the end of the routine and I could curl up in my little fetal position and just like decompress for a second, I would fall asleep and then wake myself snoring. And I was like, okay, I can't have this. It's like way too much insecurity for me. And so I found that yoga actually was a little bit distracting for me. But I use like a mindfulness app, just like this thing. It's called Headspace. And I will do, just a little 10-minute thing with it in the morning. And I'm not very good about doing it every day. But when I do it, I actually do feel quite a bit better from doing it. And I almost do a routine. It sounds like kind of what you're doing. I'll sit down and I'll read for a half hour, or I do 2 Pomodoros, so about 50 minutes. And then after I'm done reading, I do 10 minutes of this, mindfulness exercise or whatever, and then get into my day. And, sometimes when I'm busy, I'll put that stuff off, but I found that I get as much out of that as I used to get out of going to yoga. But, it's kind of my own insecurities that talk to me out of it.
No, and that's not uncommon. I find that one of our goals in our programs is that to get people comfortable enough of yoga that they'd be comfortable going to a class, that they wouldn't feel like they stuck out. Ironically, I mean, yoga is not supposed to be competitive and judgmental and all those things. It's not supposed to matter. But in particular, I find men have, they don't want to show that they can't touch their toes too. A bunch of women in the class, and it's mostly women, so it can be intimidating. So the other thing, I learned yoga on my own on a DVD disc. I was probably 10 years on the same DVD disc when I started. There wasn't yoga studios all over, and now there's on Zoom. There's all kinds of options. The other thing is, it doesn't have to be hours. I mean, 10 or 15 minutes is great. And it just slows it. It's great for the body. It's great for the joints, but it also slows the mind down. Just gives you a little bit of space. Yeah.
No, I think that's right. So I want to take you on a little bit of a tangent, and I'll forgive you if you don't have the answer, because I'm not sure anybody really does, but I want to talk to you a little bit about purpose, or uncovering our purpose. And, I know some people can do that through mindfulness. It sort of opens up pathways and gives them opportunity to hear, I don't know what you want to call it, but, the voices in their head, or the voices that are coming from outside of their body, or whatever, that helps them uncover what it is that is their purpose. But I think that this is something that a lot of people struggle with, I mean, myself included. A lot of the things that I do day to day, I just do because I've always done, right? It's not that it's necessarily purpose driven, but it's habit driven. And I think that this is probably pretty common, or I hope it's pretty common. Otherwise, it probably sounds stupid. But but what I wanted to talk to you about was just, this idea of uncovering our purpose and making sure that we're working in a way that is purposeful.
Yeah. I take a tact off of Eckhart Tolle, who wrote The New Earth and Power of Now. He talks about having an inner purpose and an outer purpose. And that's what I go with is, outer purpose is like my doings, what I do for my job. I'm on a podcast. I'm in real estate. I teach. I'm a parent. I coach. Those kind of things, my roles and my outer things. My inner purpose is to be present while I'm doing those, whatever it is I'm doing. My inner purpose is to be awake and in presence. We're actually here in the moment of doing what I'm doing. Now, the thing is, if I'm doing things like you mentioned editing, if I'm doing something I like, it's easier to be present and focused than it is if I'm doing something I don't like or I'm not good at. So my outer purposes are important, but who I am while I'm doing those things is of paramount importance. We try to bring, that who I am to what I do. In our society, we've been taught to bring what I do to who I am. Like I'm the manager, so I'm somebody, or I'm the president of this or something. And I find that's counterproductive. What I want to do is I want to have a purpose of showing up and being with whoever I'm with or doing whatever I'm doing with intention and focus. And so then from there, I find where I find the most enrichment in those outer tasks, right? If it's editing or if it's playing ball or snow skiing or real estate or whatever it is, so that I show up in a particular, if I can be present, I show up in a particular way and it's really powerful. If I can really be present in a room, I can move it. I can move things. If I'm distracted and only part in, and I'm drawn away to this and I'm drawn away to that and I'm not really in there and I got my phone on my desk and I'm checking it every few minutes, I'm not very powerful. But if I can really be focused and present, and I teach that that's my purpose. That's my inner purpose. Now, my outer purpose is what I'm doing. My inner purpose is to be awake and focused on what I'm doing, that I can really move the world. And I can do it in a really expedient fashion.
I'd
but
like
that
to layer
takes
on
some
too.
practice.
I think there's a little bit of an issue that's happening maybe more currently than in the past, which is this idea of, not only are we fuzzy about who we are and why we do what we do, but now we spend a lot of time looking at things like social media and, just the media at large and trying to live the way that other people think we should, or live to a standard that's being set by somebody totally outside of us. And so I wonder how that factors in too, in terms of, I guess, being able to distill down to who we actually are.
Because I find that we've taken what we want from what culture has put in there. So I was talking a minute ago about everything gets put, everything's in there. We've been put in there. Well, we were since birth, right? Parents, schools, media have been putting in us, the government. I mean, we've been taught that producing things and consuming things is the end all. And I love producing things and I love consuming things. There's nothing wrong with any of it, but it's not my purpose in life. Right. Those are things that I do. So I start paying attention and we try to break down that, I taught at university for 20 years and mostly seniors. And what I found, I'd have seniors in and be doing interviews with them or, consulting things with them at their senior year. And why are you here? Well, mom and dad said they'd pay for it if I would study business or engineering. What's next? I say, well, next is, the job, which if you're going to be successful, 60, 80 hours a week, then the mortgage and the family, you're going to wake up when you're 50. Spend a little time figuring out what you want to do. And you might have to tell mom and dad, thank you, but I don't want to go into finance. I don't want to go into engineering. This is what I want to do. So I think it takes some inner reflection, which meditation is one way to get at that. There's others. To really dive in and separate out from what culture is telling us. Culture is never going to be satisfied with us. Culture, is telling us it's the second homes, it's the extravagant vacations, it's the second country club, it's this. And what I've found is from myself and a lot of successful friends I have is we go out into society saying, okay, you do all these right things and then you're going to have these things and then I get to be happy and successful. What I've found is once I get those things, I just want more. Mm-hmm. I just want the bigger house, the sexier vacation, the, the more extravagant country club or whatever it is. And there's nothing wrong with any of that, except when we look to find our purpose and our happiness in it. So we try to work on being happy first. And also, I think people would rather deal with people that are happy. It's going to improve your business model, because people would rather call somebody that makes them feel better. If we're waiting to be happy until we achieve these goals, we have less chance of achieving the goals. So we try to work on being in the present moment, being happy, and still having goals, and still striving for those things, but being in the moment while we're doing them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I guess I want to just kind of finish up that little bit of conversation by asking about just sort of developing internal confidence for knowing that either we've made the right decision or being comfortable with the decision we've made in terms of identifying our purpose, right? How do we know that we didn't just grab whatever the Kardashians thought was cool? How can we, I guess, find solace or be satisfied with our pick? I guess.
Well, I think if you're referencing the Kardashians in your choice, it's probably the wrong one. You know what I mean?
So the goal from a mindfulness practice is, in my opinion, somebody else may have a different one, is we're creating a separation between thought and who we really are. That there's a consciousness, a knowing, a being that is under, and that's the one that's observing the thought, that's noticing that we have a conversation in our head, that's hearing the conversation. So a practice can help us notice that, because I think knowing that comes from your gut, and that requires that to have a separation from thought, because if we're in thought, we're going to be totally in judgment and comparison, and in that world it's never enough. So we need to be able to get out of that a little bit and realize and be in our heart, in our gut. That's where that knowing comes from, in my view. It doesn't come from thinking, because thinking is comparing always and judging things. And I'm never going to have enough in that world. Never, it's always going to be trying to measure up. So if I can get out of that and just come down to, no, this is great. I mean, there's no problem with more. That's fine. But can I be satisfied with who I am, what I am right now in this moment? And from there, I'm more actually likely to take the actions to make me more successful than I am if I'm in a state of not being enough, that I'm not enough, So.
Yeah, that seems right. I mean, just from like an attitude perspective, right? I mean, if you're constantly tearing yourself down or you don't feel like you are enough, it's pretty hard to live up to that metric.
I was reading something yesterday. It was we had a Zoom call in our leadership group last night. It was great. It was just that one of the things said, mindfulness is being, what is it called? Comfortable in your own skin. And when you're comfortable in your own skin, from that point, you can realize what's for you and what someone else is trying to tell you is for you. Right? You get to that point where, no, that's fine. Everybody's going over there. I'm going over here. That's fine. Go have a good time. I'm going to bed so I feel better tomorrow.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So it's almost that time. Can people, can you tell people where they can reach out if they want to get in touch with you? Your website's Living in the Gap. Is that the
livinginthegap.org spelled out? Yeah. And everything's on there with our programs. You can sign up for a newsletter. There's free resources, including a 21-day introduction to mindfulness, tapes on how to learn mindfulness or basic mindful stretching or yoga. Also a book coming out called Profit with Presence. It'll come out in the first quarter. It's available for pre-sale on Amazon. Profit with Presence, the 12 Pillars of Mindful Leadership, which kind of outlines what we do in our programs and make it more accessible to the business community.
Nice.
Yeah, I love it.
I'm guessing that Living in the Gap is a skiing reference. Is there more to it than that?
Yeah, the gap is that spot where one thought stops before another one starts. Or that gap where the conversation inside our head, it's a spaciousness where I find that peace and joy reside, and that stress and anxiety reside in the thoughts. Nice. So it's trying to grow a little bit of a gap in between that incessant thinking, that incessant chatter in our mind.
Love it.
Like it.
Well, thank you so much, Eric, for taking the time to do this show. We really appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate being on. Love what you're doing. Thank you much.
Absolutely. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. And we'll see you guys next time.